I went in to try to study the kinds of people that we all admire for driving creativity and change in the world. That could be, in the world of business, I think about lots of entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
somebody who, really is disruptive with their ability to innovate. But I was also interested in social change. So the women's suffrage movement, sort of moving in the direction of racial equality and people who champion that kind of change as well. And I assume that what made them different from the rest of us is that they were willing to take more risks than we were. And I was stunned to find that that's not the case. That, in fact, most original thinkers don't like taking risks any more than you or I do. Yeah, they do it because a new idea is inherently uncertain, and they know you have to sort of swing big if you want to hit a home run.
Mhm.
But they don't enjoy it. They don't necessarily seek out risk. And when they do take risks, they balance them out like a little bit like a stock portfolio. So Bill Gates is a great example. The myth of Bill Gates is that he drops out of Harvard to found Microsoft. The reality of Bill Gates is that he's not interested in taking risks. He wants to have a pretty predictable success. So what he does is waits till he has a year of software sales under his belt. And instead of dropping out of Harvard, he actually takes a leave of absence and he has his parents' financial support. So it's almost like, yeah, he's bet on a pretty unproven stock, but he has a bunch of money in some very safe mutual funds just in case. When people are thinking about, whether to go forward with their ideas or not, they start to ask themselves, well, what will I regret? And in the moment, your biggest regrets have to do with failure. And, you just feel like, okay, I don't want to jeopardize my reputation. And so, a lot of people become afraid of failure. And I think what was so interesting is I talked to some really interesting original thinkers, and I heard basically the same thing from a bunch of pioneers in tech. So I talked to Elon Musk, to Larry Page, to Mark Cuban, to Jack Dorsey, and a bunch of others. And they basically, I'd kind of seen them as people who weren't afraid of failure. And every one of them said, I'm terrified of failure. Like, I want to be successful. I want to achieve my goals. I want to have an impact. And so, the idea of failing is one of my worst nightmares. But they also said, each in slightly different language, but hitting on the exact same theme. They also said, there's failure, and then there's a bigger kind of failure, which is the failure to try. And they said, in the short run, it feels like, trying and failing is the worst possible outcome. But in the long run, it's actually worse to say I never tried at all. And so the way they motivated themselves was to fast forward with a little bit of mental time travel and say 20 to 30 years down the road, looking back, what will I regret more? That I gave an idea a shot and it didn't pan out, or that I never took the chance. And I think they intuitively understood what psychologists have found for years on regret, which is exactly that in the long run, our biggest regrets are not our actions, they're our inactions. They're the chances we didn't take. And I think if you remember that, it's a lot easier to put the opportunity in perspective and say, you know what, I want to be the kind of person who gives my ideas a shot.